Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Calling Home. I am Whitney Goodman, and I am so excited because I have been putting together this series of episodes where I am going to be hosting a bunch of really amazing guests that are all therapists. You probably know some of them. And we're going to be talking about family dynamics in pop culture, television, and movies. Every episode that comes out, I'm going to be releasing like one a month over the next couple of months. We'll be diving into a different show, pop culture moment, or movie, and the family dynamic that is coming up. My guests that are coming on will be reacting blind to the show. So they don't know what show we're going to be talking about or what the dynamics are before they join. And you don't need to have seen the show to get the episode and really get something from it. Today is my first episode in the series, and I am so excited to dive into season 2 of Nobody Wants This from Netflix. And my guest is Meg Josephson. She's the author of the New York Times bestseller, Are You Mad at Me? This show is very special to me because my husband is Jewish. I am not. And while this show and the family dynamics doesn't really totally reflect my life, I think there's so many moments of like combining different traditions and faiths and family cultures and being like a blonde non-Jew that is marrying a Jewish man that like are so true and accurate and funny and have happened in different variations in my life that I just have such a soft spot for this show, and I'm really excited to share it with you. If you'd like to watch the show before we dive into it so you don't hear any spoilers or anything like that, you can watch it on Netflix, and the season 1 and season 2 are at now. I chose this show because it does such a brilliant job of capturing the quiet, like chaos and nuance of family life, especially when two very different families are being forced to merge together. And today we're going to be looking at Joanne and Noah. They are a new couple trying to build a life together in the middle of two completely opposite family systems. And I really want to talk about Bina, Noah's mother, who is controlling, intrusive. She's a master of guilt and intimidation. And she's the kind of mother that everyone tiptoes around. And then on the other side, we have Joanne's family that's pretty detached, avoidant. They're emotionally distant, and they hide behind humor and sarcasm. So even though they're very nice and kind and funny, you can tell there's still some pain and deficits there underneath that sort of like veneer that they've created. Joanne and Noah are caught between these two very different types of family systems, and they're trying to figure out what family even means to them, whose traditions they'll keep, how much access everyone gets, and what a normal family even looks like. Remember that Meg is coming into this episode blind. She doesn't know what show we're going to be talking about, and she didn't do any prep. So I'm going to walk her through all of the scenes right alongside all of you listening. And together we'll unpack what's really going on underneath, like the sibling dynamics, the mother-in-law relationship, and what closeness really is in a family. All right, Meg, welcome to the Calling Home podcast.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah. So I told the listeners before we jumped on that this is the first time that we're doing a show like this. So thank you for being my guinea pig with this
Such a
concept.
fun idea. So
Yeah.
I'm honored.
Thank you. All right. So we're going to be talking about the show Nobody Wants This on Netflix. Are you familiar with this
I
show?
am, but I'm halfway through the new season.
Okay.
If
Oh
that
no, I hope
ruins
I'm not going to
anything,
spoil anything for
it's
you.
okay. It's okay.
But the scenes that I'm going to be talking about are mainly from the first couple of episodes. So you might have some familiarity
It's
with
fresh
it.
in my mind too. It's great.
Amazing. So this show, as you know, since you've seen some of it, and for anyone who hasn't, is really about it's a love story, but I think there's so many family dynamics like wrapped up into this show. It's really more of a show about uniting families, I think.
Yeah.
And I shared this in the intro, but I'll tell you, I am married to someone who is Jewish. I'm not Jewish. So my husband and I have had such a, you as
Same.
well.
Exactly the same dynamic.
Oh,
I'm
so
a
funny.
shiksa.
Okay, same. And so we're watching this and it's like, my family, my in-laws are not like these people. My husband's obviously not a rabbi, but there are some funny like nuances to the show for sure. Well, what fate then that
Oh
we
my,
are
it's
both
perfect. This is meant to
discussing
be.
this.
Yeah. My
Yeah.
husband's also not a rabbi. Another parallel.
Good to know. Exactly. All right. So let's start with some of the characters that we're going to be talking about today. And I'll just kind of catch everyone up to speed. Joanne is the main female character we have, right? And she's in a relationship with Noah, who is the rabbi. And she hosts a podcast with her sister Morgan, which is another weird thing that I'm like, oh, I host a podcast and I'm blonde. And, there are just so many similarities in the show. But Joanne, I think, has a lot of abandonment wounds and can definitely be quite anxiously attached. Then we have Morgan, her sister, who is dating her therapist, which we'll get to that later. And she's much more reactive, I think, than Joanne. And then there's also their mother, who's pretty forgetful, emotionally unavailable, and she is very avoidant, I think, through humor and sarcasm and things like that. She's nice, but not totally emotionally connected to her children.
Totally.
Yeah. And then we have their father, obviously, who came out as gay later in life. He has a lot of relationships, also very aloof. And like they spend a lot of time together as a family, but it certainly is very different when we compare it to Noah's family, right? And so Noah is the rabbi who is dating Joanne. And I think we're going to spend a lot of time today talking about Bina, his mother, who is the domineering matriarch, in this family. And she uses a lot of guilt to assert control. And then we obviously have Noah's father, who I think is more connected, but he's a quiet enabler of Bina, right? And we see that throughout the show. And then Noah's older brother, Sasha, they have a good relationship, but they seem to spend a lot of time together. But I think Noah is more like the favorite or the golden child in that relationship. All right. So we're going to dive into some scenes here, and then I'm going to ask you some questions and we'll have some discussions about like what is going on here.
Perfect.
From a
so much to talk
perspective.
about.
I know, right? So you've seen season 1, obviously.
Yes.
That at the end, they're going to try to make it work despite Joanne not being Jewish. And we see this kind of putting Noah's career in jeopardy because he's up for a new job as the head rabbi at the temple. And we learn that he didn't get the job as head rabbi. And this is a big disappointment. And it's likely because his girlfriend, Joanne, isn't Jewish. And we see Bina get very upset about this. And she starts to like begin a campaign against Joanne, right? And instead of comforting her son, she's really centering herself. And I don't know if you remember that scene, but the one I'm thinking about is like where the new rabbi that got hired is like gives the sermon, and after she is just like so upset about what's happening. She's talking poorly about the new rabbi. And Noah says, you'd think it was happening to her. And so I'm curious what you think about the way his mom's acting and like what happens when the parent's identity gets so fused with the child.
Yes. I think it's what I witnessed with Bina, that's her name, right?
Yes.
Is there's a constant threat. Like I think because her identity is so enmeshed with her golden boy, anything that threatens him and his success, therefore threatens her and her perception, whether it's Joanne getting in the way of being seen as this like, perfect Jewish family or getting in the way of his career. And I find that her way of navigating or protecting herself against that threat tends to be more fight through not an aggressive, I mean, can be aggressive, but I think more through criticism, through controlling the narrative,
Hmm.
through trying to get other people to talk badly about the other rabbi or about Joanne as a way to feel in control once again, so that she can feel safe and the perception and the narrative can go back to what she wants it to be. What do you
Totally.
think?
No, I think that's so accurate about her. I feel like she is presents as so tough, but is actually quite fragile
Yeah.
and very insecure. And like having her son, I mean, I think if you're not familiar with Judaism, like being a rabbi in the community is a very respected, highly regarded position. You have a lot of visibility, and there is something to being like, "Oh, my son is the head
Yeah.
rabbi." And it seems like she was really tying herself to that, and a lot of her identity hinges on him being that head rabbi. Like, I'm curious if she's getting respect in the community or at temple, everyone's coming up to her
Yeah.
because that's her son's role. And now that's kind of in question.
Totally. And it makes me wonder what other what other identities does she hold? Does she hold any sort of other purpose or sense of meaning in her life, or is it fully in her son and the success, which is conditional? Success can change and morph and fluctuate, and so it's a risky thing to put all your eggs in how your son is doing in his
Hmm.
life. But what
Yeah.
was also interesting is, remember that scene where she's with Morgan in the bathroom and they have kind of a, for Bina, a loving conversation, and Morgan was like, I actually like her. I think she was cool.
Yeah.
I thought that was really interesting because although Morgan is affiliated and associated with Joanne, I think Morgan felt less threatening because she's not directly tied to her son. She's not the one affecting her son in that way. I feel like they were able to have a more emotionally connected moment. And we
Hmm.
saw a softer side of Bina maybe when she saw Morgan crying, but there's softness there. It's just protected
Totally.
by this tough exterior.
Totally. I felt like in that scene too that because Morgan is so externally like tough and
Yeah.
she was being vulnerable there, that Bina was like, "Oh, you can let your guard down," and almost felt okay doing it with her. There was also maybe not as much of that feeling of like vulnerability that she gets with Joanne.
Yeah.
And I'm just thinking about like how hard it is to be in a relationship with a man who has a relationship like this with his mother.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know. Like, I think for people listening, like, if you're watching this and thinking, oh, wow, that reminds me of my mother in law or of my partner's
Yeah.
mother, like, what do you think are some of the challenges that come up there?
Well, it's funny because I almost think Joanne's relationship to Bina perhaps mirrors maybe what it's Noah, right?
Yeah,
Why do I forget names
you're
so
good. It's a
easily?
lot to keep track of.
Maybe as a reflection of what Noah has felt in his life, in that I need to work so hard to be loved. And he has maintained this status and this image. So he's safe under her wing, under her controlling wing. But Joanne hasn't yet proven that about herself. So she has to keep
Mm,
working really hard to be, quote, good enough for his son. But I do wonder who would be good enough. I think about his ex, Rebecca,
yeah.
and I think she really liked her because, am I remembering that from the first season? She approved
Mhm.
of Rebecca because she fit into maybe this expectation of what she thought her son needed or deserved. And Joanne isn't good enough. And what is good enough? How is she defining that?
Yeah. It's making me think about how, like, parents have, myself included, like, I have children and I might think
Mm,
about, oh, this is what I always imagined for you. And that
yeah.
not coming true. And I think for some people, like, whether it's religion or how they look or where they live, like, parents go through an adjustment period sometimes of being like, this isn't what I expected. And I think some get stuck in that. We're like,
Yeah,
this isn't what I expected. And so then it's wrong. And Rebecca was
totally.
very much exactly what you would expect the rabbi's wife to be, right? For those of
Yeah,
you that haven't seen the show, like she's Jewish. She presents herself in a way that is just like, I don't know, when you would think like that's the rabbi's wife, it's
yeah.
probably what you would picture.
Very put together, very elegant, very modest as a person, like very polite, all
Mhm.
good girl energy. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And Joanne like had this podcast where she's talking about sex and cursing and like,
Right.
it's not just that she's not Jewish, I think. It's that she does not perform like modesty, like you're saying, in
Yeah.
this way that a rabbi's wife or a good Jewish girl
Hmm.
would.
Yeah. I imagine it feels scary for Bina. Like I have empathy for her of wow, it must feel so threatening when those are your values and that's the expectation and vision that you've held for you and your family, and to have that be threatened, and it's now so out of your control. And if she has felt in control of her family her whole life, and now he gets to make a decision that she doesn't have a say in, that must be so scary. And I remember Noah said, like, I'm not coming to Shabbat if Joanne isn't there.
Yes.
And that power switch where like Noah gets to now make the decisions about him and his new family, not new as
Mhm.
in replacing, but he has his own unit now. I imagine that, gosh, is, yeah, stirring up a lot of fear and anxiety in Bina.
Totally. So yeah, that's like, I'm so glad you mentioned that because that's a perfect segue kind of into this next scene, which is the Shabbat exclusion, right?
Yes.
And for those of you that are not familiar with Shabbat, some Jewish families like practice this where they will eat together every Friday. Some do not use any technology, don't go on their phones, but it's kind of just this tradition of like uniting as a family on Fridays with degrees of intensity.
Hmm.
And this is something that Noah's family seems to do every Friday, which is a lot for Joanne. Like, I think this is where they start to see the differences in how they view family. But
Yeah.
back to what you just said about Bina, I do think this was such a big moment for Noah of being like, I am forming my own family.
Yeah.
And I think she even says, like, Shabbat is for family. And he says, like, didn't you invite your facialist or
Yeah.
something to Shabbat one time? Kind of pointing out the hypocrisy
Yeah.
in what she's saying.
Hmm.
How important do you think those moments are for like the adult child to kind of stand up to the parent in that way?
Oh, so important and so uncomfortable because this, if a parent in whatever dynamic really the family has, the parent has set the tone and created the guidelines and boundaries of the family. And now as the adult child grows into their own, it's vulnerable and scary for the adult child. It's unsettling and unfamiliar to the parent, whether they're emotionally mature or not. But I think that was such a pivotal moment
Yeah.
just for him to form his own identity outside of her. And not that it has to be, I think this narrative of like mother-in-law versus like daughter-in-law is
Mhm.
so, you know, what's the word I'm looking for? Like, it's so competitive in
Yeah.
media. Like, it's choose, which one are you going to choose? And so not that it's him choosing Joanne, but he's stating this person's important to me, and if you
Mhm.
want time with me, you have to open your home and your arms to her. I think
Yeah.
that was important.
No, you're so right. I think that these moments, and if they don't happen like early on in the relationship, it's much harder to go back. Like,
Yes.
had he said, "Okay, I'm not going to bring her," and he went
Yeah.
without her, I think we would have seen this play out very differently because it is
Hmm.
so hard once you sort of surrender that power and be like, okay, mom, I'm going to listen to you and I'm not going to bring my partner. I think you're setting a precedent of like, this is how we're going to navigate this moving
Totally.
forward.
Yeah.
And in that moment, I actually think Bina and I think a lot of parents of adult kids do this when they feel like they're backed into a corner,
Mm-hmm.
was trying out old methods on her son to see if they worked.
Yes,
Right?
definitely.
Yeah. Of like, I'm going to see if I can control you. Like, if I
Mm-hmm.
disapprove of this, will you listen? And when she played that, I don't think it worked in the same way that it maybe would have when he was like 15.
Absolutely. And I think obviously because he's older, he's more mature now. And also he's receiving love from other sources too. Like his sense of, do I have love and safety in my life isn't fully riding on her anymore, which I think is what triggers that feeling of threat for her and like the need to control in the first place. And I think, we gravitate towards what's familiar because familiar feels safe. And for her, she's seeing, wait, familiar isn't safe anymore. These tactics aren't working and the control isn't working. So I'm going to have to change. And I think for her, that feels very intolerable.
Absolutely. And no one has ever made her change. Like,
Yeah,
I think that's when you look at this system from the outside, and I think this is where the husband kind of comes into play, is like they've all been circling around her.
totally. Yeah.
She is the most challenging person in the family. And I think that brings us like to the next scene that you may not have got to yet, but it's where they're playing basketball, like after
Mm-hmm.
he has said, if she's not going to Shabbat, I'm not coming. And we see Joanne talking to the sister-in-law. I'm blanking on her name.
Esther, of
Esther,
course.
yes, Esther. Okay. Which
Which
she's
is,
had like the
she's had
best
a whole journey.
redemption arc this season. But Esther, they've had this like Shabbat fallout, and Joanne is talking to Esther at the basketball game. And she's talking about how she wants to like reach out to Bina and make peace, and she's going to write her an email.
Oh, I did see this. Yeah.
Okay. And Esther is basically like, no, you need to treat her like a mob boss. And I
Yeah.
thought this was such a testament to how the family has been operating
Yeah.
around her, right? Do you
Yeah.
do you see that?
Oh, for sure. It's such an appeasement, it's the fawn response hard at work of like, let me be a chameleon and
Mhm.
match the needs and moods and emotions of the most powerful, often dysfunctional person in the family system, because that's how we can survive it. Like if Esther were to, from the beginning, go against Bina or call out what she's seeing, she's probably not going to be approved of. And, what am I going to prioritize? Harmony or, saying my opinion? And so Esther
Yeah,
chose, I think, out of, craving for belonging and safety, appeasing Bina.
totally.
Yeah.
And it seems like I might be getting this wrong, but I think that Esther and her husband, Bina's other son, had a child and got married very young. And so it
Yeah.
seems like she was entering the family system under very different circumstances. Like she
Right.
probably didn't have a choice. I think in this show, Joanne's supposed to be probably like 35, something like
Mm-hmm.
that,
Yeah.
and much more established in life, like confident in herself versus a 22-year-old,
Yeah.
coming into this family that she
More
probably was like, this
vulnerable.
is how I do it.
Totally. Yeah. And is Esther Jewish? I believe
Yes.
so. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so I think that helped, that played a role, this default approval already.
Hmm.
Can I talk about Noah a
No,
little bit
please
here
go ahead.
too? Where I notice, especially this season, I feel like there's been such a shift in him, at least where I am right now, where you're seeing just so his sort of attachment come out more, where he is such a conflict avoidant appeaser in that way, of course, because with his mom, like he probably had to be easy and go with the
Mhm.
flow and put your anger and upsetness down, be good, be a good. And what that's certainly also through the lens of religion as well. Like you need to be good, don't be bad, and do the right thing. And but just seeing that come out in this scene with there at the tree, and when they were him being
Yes, yes.
this was right outside of the basketball court. He was so hesitant to show anger, to be upset because he just wanted to be easy and good. And that to me was such a glimpse into how he has survived with Bina, how he has allowed there to be harmony in that relationship. Just don't disrupt her. And I think we all have different ways of doing that in dysfunctional families or when there is someone quite powerful and controlling. And I think for him, that's what worked.
Yeah. Hearing you say that makes me think like that moment where he told her, like, I'm not coming to Shabbat must have been so huge for him
Yeah.
and so terrifying in a lot of ways because it was probably like the first time in his whole life he ever really had to do something like
Yeah.
or could.
Totally. I imagine so. And I feel
Yeah.
like I'm trying to remember how he said that, but I feel like he didn't even seem too scared.
No, you're
He
right.
seemed pretty confident. And so it feels to me like that shows his how much he cares about Joanne and how he's just like, it's a no-brainer. Like it's a non-negotiable. You have to let her in. And so
Yeah.
I really appreciated his leadership in that moment.
Totally. It's making me think of also like throughout the season, like as you keep watching, you'll see that Noah is having such a conflict with like his relationship to Judaism and
Yeah.
how, I guess, traditional or devout he wants to be and how
Mm-hmm.
much he's able to like be flexible. And so I feel like in that moment he's like, I love Joanne and I want to be with her and I feel connected to her. And I'm also being told maybe by the temple that I can't be with her because she's not
Yeah.
truly Jewish or right for me. And like he's making all these decisions that are very contradictory at times. And that can
Mm-hmm.
be confusing for the family, especially when you have someone who has become a rabbi. You would probably think like,
Yeah.
oh, that's the most secure part of him.
Yeah. It's such an identity shakeup. And I don't remember if has that been his like dream his whole life? I think
I
so.
think so. I mean, at
Yeah.
least for the last several years, it seems like that's all he's been focused on.
Yeah. So to me, it almost feels like his dream of being head rabbi is uh, similar to, and that being a core piece of his identity is similar to Bina
Yeah.
having her identity be the success of her son. Like it's all very tied up together. So if he doesn't have, in the same way that if he's not a rabbi, Bina might feel anxious or who am I if my son isn't succeeding, uh, mirrors the sort of uncertainty that he feels
Yeah.
as well. The existential crisis of like, who am I when I'm not publicly seen as this person? What's
Hmm.
left if that's not there?
Yeah, absolutely. Which I think brings us to like this next part where it's very easy to blame Joanne, right, for this
Yeah.
shakeup and this change. And we see this moment where Joanne is trying to read this email to Bina and like treat her as like, a mob boss or tell her something. And,
Yeah.
and Bina cuts her off and just says, because of you, my son's career is ruined. He won't come to Shabbat dinner. You have cocooned my son away from the family, which this is a narrative I hear all the time,
Oof.
right? Like, you
Yeah.
took my
So
baby
extreme.
away. Yeah. And I was so struck that Joanne looks at her and says,
Hmm.
if something is getting between you and Noah, it's not me, it's you.
Yeah. That was
And
powerful.
really powerful. I mean, what do you think of that? Like saying that to this mother in law?
I mean, so courageous because I doubt many people have stood up to Bina before.
Yeah.
And I think in part why she's not immediately letting her in. This is new. No one's done this before. But this narrative that Bina holds of like it's there's some projection happening for sure of Bina saying like you're controlling my son, you're taking him away from me. I think she's letting us into maybe what is going on for her, that she is surviving through control and she finds a harmony through controlling the relationships. And so for someone else to be in control, that's too much. But I
Yeah.
think that was such a I want to say pivotal moment for Joanne, but I feel like that's kind of been her style. the whole
Hmm.
time. She's like never, she hasn't been too people pleasy
Yeah.
with Bina.
No, I think you're right. And this this moment also to me is like I hear this a lot from in-laws
Yeah.
that it is too hard for them to conceive sometimes that their child is thinking differently than them or making different
Mm,
decisions. So it has to be this like nefarious outside force.
yeah.
And what's interesting here is that Joanne doesn't even know at this moment until Bina says this that Noah has told his mother he's not coming to Shabbat because Joanne wasn't invited.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like that, she wasn't even part of this conversation.
Yeah.
And she also had told him, take the job. And he
Mm-hmm.
decided not to, or he decided to stay with her, despite her not knowing if she could convert. So this narrative of like, this is all your fault is like not rooted in Joanne's reality at
It's not
all.
right. They're seeing such different pictures. I think in
Mhm.
this type of family dynamic, because there's such, someone has to be right, someone has to be wrong, someone has to be good, someone has to be bad. And if someone is encroaching on disrupting those roles, they're obviously bad because they're not fitting the mold that has been the way of being for all these years, as opposed to curiosity or openness or like, oh, you're feeling this way, tell me more about that, what's going on for you. There's just this immediate defensiveness because there has to be, the most dysfunctional or dysregulated person has to be right, and
Yes.
everything else will form around that.
Yep. Yep. And that's definitely how it's always functioned. And so then you have this outside person coming in who doesn't look or act anything like what you wanted to come into your house.
Yeah.
And I think the first reaction when you don't have the capacity for this is to be like, okay, I can fix this by getting rid of you
Totally.
instead of
Yes.
trying to understand what's going on here. And I get why
Absolutely.
people do that at first, right?
And I think what's kind of, I think what triggers a lot of this tension and conflict in in-law situations is, I find that usually the person coming into the family, they're able to see the dynamic of the family
Yes.
very clearly because they're watching it not that they know everything and they understand all the baggage of the family, but they're able to witness it from the outside while also being in it and
Hmm.
kind of a fly on the wall. I think that's really uncomfortable for someone like Bina because she wants to hold this narrative that everything's perfect and that
Yes.
she's perfect and she's always right. And so for someone to see it as it is, not that Joanne holds this objective truth, what is objective at all, but I just think that's kind of the core of what can cause some of that in-law tension.
Absolutely. And then to say, like, it's this narrative of like everything was fine until you got here and
Yeah,
started like pointing
yeah.
out problems and meddling. And I think sometimes like this isn't exclusive to Judaism, it can be any community, but when you are
Mhm.
really immersed in a community, and let's say that most of your friends are the same religion as you and the same, all the
Mhm.
families, they kind of look the same. And so you don't ever think maybe mine's a little bit different
Mhm.
until someone comes in and says, okay, well, my family's not like this.
Yeah.
Like there's a lot more variety to family structure outside of this community that you might not be aware of. And that can be
Yeah.
uncomfortable for Bina as well.
Absolutely. And I think even within communities and even within families, I hear this so much as a therapist of people processing their childhood dynamics and them just saying, well, I thought this was normal. I thought
Yes.
everyone's parent did this. I didn't know that there was another way. And or maybe you went to people's houses as a kid and you're like, oh, they don't scream as a way to resolve conflict, or they don't name call each other. And seeing that there are other family dynamics is quite a life altering realization.
So I'm very sorry to spoil it for you, but Bina
It's okay.
does surrender and I think realizes that
Yay.
her tactics that we talked about that she's trying again are not working.
Yeah.
And we see Joanne at Shabbat, right?
Yay.
But when she comes, Bina is still like, she's sitting at the head of the table. Everyone is around her. Her husband isn't even like at the other head. I think it's just like she's at the head and everyone's around. And she's controlling where everyone sits. She's telling Joanne, like, that's not how we do it. And this scene happens where Joanne starts texting at the table.
Oh, is this about her mom's? Because her mom's birthday's. Okay,
Yes.
I saw this scene.
Yes.
Yeah,
Okay.
okay.
Perfect. So I haven't
This
spoiled
is
it for you
great.
yet.
Yeah.
So Joanne's texting at the table and she's like, oh, it's my mom's birthday, or her sister got her mom's birthday
I loved
wrong.
this.
And the family kind of freezes, Noah's family, and is like, do you hate your mother? Like, you only text her at 6 p.m. on her birthday, like she's waited the whole day by the phone or something. And you just see them all panicking because I think they
Right.
know they could never do that with Bina. Like, they probably have
Right.
to be at the
Right.
door at 8 a.m. on her
And I
birthday.
think it turned out she was saying, no, my mom's birthday's tomorrow, but my sister
Yes.
always gets it wrong and she thought it was
Yes.
today. She always thinks it's the 4th, but it's the 5th. But
Yes.
that reaction of them being like, which I see both sides, but I
Yeah.
thought it was an interesting,
Exactly.
interesting.
Like,
Yeah.
you don't even know your mom's birthday.
Yeah.
And then I think Noah also starts to get like uncomfortable and he's like, I missed your mom's birthday.
Yeah.
Should I send her flowers? And I feel like this is such a sort of like duel between family
Yes.
cultures of like, how are we going to do things?
I loved this scene so
Yeah.
much. And I think it just brought out so much. It brought out the emotional distance that Joanne's family has, that it's like, well, I don't know. We used to do stuff, but now we don't really. And we just do it because whatever. And then I think Noah feeling like, oh my gosh, I'm not being a good boyfriend or a good son-in-law figure. And that brought up so much anxiety for him because he's always the good boyfriend and he takes a lot of pride in doing that. There's so much there.
Yeah. In the same way we talked about like Bina realizing there's other types of families or like having this outsider come in, I think this was sort of that moment for Joanne of like, is it weird that we don't call my mom on her birthday or spend the day with her? And she sort of starts spiraling about that.
It was really illuminating for me too. I felt like we got a peek into, yes, should I be doing that? But also like, I want to do that. And I think it speaks to sort of, I'm definitely inserting a lot of like thought that isn't necessarily maybe not true for Joanne, but just to this dynamic, this sort of grief around, I want a parent to celebrate. I want a family that does these things on birthdays, but I don't have that. I don't have, and then they celebrate the mom's birthday and the mom is very aloof and she's like, that's not the energy I want for this birthday. And there's just so much distance in the room. You can really feel it. And I felt kind of sad for Joanne of like, oh, I'm sure that she would want this closeness. Who wouldn't? But it's not there. It's not an option. And no matter how hard she tries, that won't exist. And that is something that maybe Bina and Noah's family can't understand, is like, you can try really hard, but if that parent is emotionally distant, that closeness can only get so close.
Yep.
And that's hard.
You're so right. And I hadn't really thought about it like this from this perspective yet. And it's making me think of like, there's a lot of adults who are estranged from parents or who don't have close relationships with their parents that you're right. They desperately want it. And I think outsiders sometimes look at that adult and say, you are not family oriented. You don't want to be close with your family. You don't prioritize them. When in reality, there's no one there to prioritize. And I think that's how Bina was looking at Joanne as almost like a bad daughter.
Yeah.
But we see later that her mother is like confused. She's like, why am I spending my birthday with you guys? I think she says that out loud.
Yeah.
And you realize this, you're so right. It's not about Joanne not wanting to celebrate her family or be with them. It's just like, they don't want that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I am kind of the stance, because I felt this so much as a child. And I actually have a line in my book that says, when describing this sort of grief of like, I wanting to be family oriented if only you had a family to do that with.
Yeah.
And when I think maybe this is too big of a statement, but I do think every child I think it's fair to say every child craves that and
I think
is
that's fair.
naturally family oriented, but we
Yes.
learn to shut that out because we learn it's disappointing when I try so hard. I met with rejection or criticism or conditional love that's taken away. And I learn it's easier to keep a distance than to try to let myself in and be let down once
Yep.
again.
Yep, absolutely. And we don't know this from the show, but I think we could make the fair assumption that maybe they did spend birthdays together
Yeah.
at some point for a while and it wasn't good and nobody liked it. And I think we see the marriage, now they're divorced, Joanne and
Yeah.
Morgan's parents, but it seems like that was very devoid of any
Yeah.
intimacy or connection. And so if the parents aren't modeling that on holidays too, or the dad's not celebrating the mom and vice versa, I think
Yeah.
it's hard for the kids to develop that skill set.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And then you see their dad, just it always goes back to him and his dating and
Yes.
this person didn't text me back. He's very self-focused. I think he's excited. He's exploring this new identity and dating culture and he wants someone to talk about it with. But you can feel that sort of they're trying to connect, and then both parents in their different ways will just push away that connection.
Yeah. Yeah. And the parents in Joanne's family feel very much like the children in a lot of ways. I think
Yeah.
Joanne and Morgan parent them. And I'm thinking a lot about the scene. I think it's at the end of the mom's birthday. I'm not sure if you got to this yet, but Joanne is really upset and she's laying in the bed like she's crying or she's very visibly upset, I think, to even
Mm-hmm.
like the most unattentive eye.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
her mom has like headphones on and is
Oh,
laughing, watching something on her laptop. And it was such this clear depiction of like, I do not see that you're suffering. I don't
yeah.
notice. And even if I do, I think I'm just going to put headphones on and like tune
Yeah.
you out.
Oh, I think her mom is a really good example of a parent can be emotionally distant and not mean.
Yes.
Where like
Yes.
she's not cruel. She's actually quite sweet and innocent, but there's just like you said, there's this aloofness to her
Yeah.
where you just can't really reach her. Like she's there, but she seems far away. And that can be confusing, I think, for adult children to process. It's like, well, my parent doesn't call me names. They're not,
Yes.
but there's a loneliness when you're in the same room as them. And that scene is a perfect example of that.
Yeah. And this parent is almost impossible to confront, I think, with
Totally.
that reality. Because
Yeah.
if you look at this mother, it's like, what would you say to her other than like, I just don't feel connected to you? And she's not going to understand that
Totally.
because I think that's just how she operates. And you're right. It's not like she's name calling and yelling and being
Yeah.
mean. And she's spending time with her
Yeah.
daughters. Like it would be so hard to express how you felt in a relationship
Totally.
like that. You almost
That's
wish
one.
they were
Yeah.
more abusive so that you had
Absolutely.
like data.
Wishing it was, quote, bad enough to
Yes.
have that reason to feel far from a parent. And it is so hard. You're right. It's kind of a dynamic that you need to grieve on your own. And in fact, the mom might say, I think we're so close. What are you
100%.
talking about?
Yep.
Because for her, that might be the closest relationship she has. That's her highest capacity of being
Mhm.
close to someone. So it is kind of an internal processing more than anything.
Yeah. You know what's so interesting about that? I'm thinking about how I think she does notice the mom that her husband was not connected to her when they were married. Like she has these glimpses of being like,
Yeah.
I felt really lonely being married to you. She says that in
Mm,
her own way, but she can't tap into how it might feel like that to be in relationship with her.
yeah. And seeing the parallels of that. And it's interesting, like her being unconsciously drawn to someone that feels far away. We don't know what their marriage looked like in the beginning before his coming out or,
Yeah.
realization of his sexuality. But I wonder how familiar, I would imagine that loneliness is really familiar to the
Mm-hmm.
mom in her relationships.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Absolutely. So the last scene I want to talk about that we may be reaching the point now where you haven't seen
That's
is
okay. I
that
can't believe my luck
I
with
know,
how I've
right?
seen all of
You've seen
these.
pretty much everything that I've brought up.
It's
So
crazy. I think we're
amazing.
now at the point where
It's
I've
fate.
left the
Yes.
building, but that's great.
There's one last scene with Bina that I think is very interesting. And it's nighttime, I think, and she lets herself in to Sasha and Esther's house with a
Wait, I did
key.
see this.
Okay.
This is the last scene.
Okay, perfect. This is the last scene that I'm doing, so we're good. Um, and she has a copied key that he does not know
Yes.
that she has. And she just kind of busts in and is like, we need more babies in the family.
Yes.
Like, who knows how long it's
Hadn't
going
they
to take
just had
Noah?
sex too? Like Esther's in
Yes.
an oversized t-shirt. They're
Yes.
like not trying to be, they're not presentable.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And she says, I could be dead by then, by the time like Noah has kids, which is such
Yeah.
a
Yeah.
really unique, like emotionally immature
For
parent
sure.
tactic
Uh-huh.
to use. And then in this moment, Sasha says to her mom, give me the key back. And she just smiles and says, no,
Yeah.
and keeps the key. And I feel like this says so much about how she views her children's like autonomy as adults.
Yeah. There's so much. I mean, that tactic of threatening or this impending death of like, you don't, one day I'll be gone and you'll regret, or it's this, it's such a threatening existential way to exert control. And it's also, we all are going to die and we don't know when that will be. Like you just, it's such an interesting, it's such a baffling thing to say for me, but it's just interesting to me too, their Sasha and Esther's sort of attitude versus Joanne and Noah. They feel much more like it's more, haha, you're so ridiculous, but they're not mad. They're just like, there's nothing I can do.
They're
So
helpless, powerless to it.
totally.
Mm-hmm.
Which makes it easier. In some ways, it's there's more acceptance of her. It's,
Yeah.
oh, this is who she is. So we're just gonna, in order to have a relationship with her, we just have to accept her. Like in some ways, they live a more easeful life, and that is how they've
Mm-hmm.
adapted to survive in this relationship. But there's nothing's gonna change for
Yeah.
sure.
Yeah. I feel like Bina is a very funny, extreme caricature of like
Hmm.
how people view sometimes the Jewish mother, right? How it's talked
Uh-huh.
about like culturally. And so I wonder if for Esther, it's just like that's how they are. Like maybe
Yeah,
her mother was the same and her grandmother. And like it's just a funny cultural thing when you're growing up in it versus, it's the same. Like my mom's Hispanic and there are things of like, oh, that's just how Hispanic
totally.
mothers are. And it's easier when you've conditioned that into you than
Yes.
if you're an outsider.
I think totally. Yeah. Like there's you've had this acceptance, you understand it. And it is this tricky line of, I think in some ways with culture, it's like, well, this is family. Like the family, everyone has their quirks and we're all ridiculous and you accept people, people annoy you, and that's family. And then when is that line crossed to this is not okay? And I think that is such a hard line to toe when it comes to culture. Like someone, she barged into their house unannounced, has a key. It was
Right.
such a scene.
Right. A key that was not given to her, like that she
Correct.
made herself. That's to me like what really crosses the line. Like if
Yeah.
I made you a key and you used it, okay, I'm going to take some
Of
responsibility
course. Of
for
course.
doing that. Maybe we didn't discuss the parameters for use of the
Yeah.
key, but like you making the key without my consent is
Yes.
different.
And demanding something,
Yeah.
demanding another grandchild.
Right.
And there's a lot there too. If Esther was struggling with fertility, if and they hadn't talked about it, there's, if they, whatever reason that could be the reason, there's just that imposition of like, give me what I want, even if it's not in your control. We
Yeah.
can't we can't always control when a child will arrive to Earth.
Right.
So, yeah.
Yeah, and I think I think it's in season 1, like the whole bat mitzvah thing where you see that their daughter, I think her name's Mira, like
Mm-hmm.
there's a lot of intergenerational stuff going on there where Esther is sort of pushing back against some of the norms that
Yeah.
Bina wants to impart on her. And so I think for Bina, she's like, let's have another baby because we are having a baby.
Yeah.
It's not
Yeah.
just you guys.
I do think the timing of that is interesting. When she feels like she's kind of losing Noah and the
Yes, so
pride of
true.
that, let me now have maybe something. Of course, she wants a grandchild, but I wonder if there's also another element of this will be something I can tell people of
Yeah.
something exciting or something that is uniting the family once again because this other factor is breaking us apart.
And it will overshadow, the fact that my son is not head rabbi because now we are
Exactly.
having
Exactly.
another baby. Such a
Let's
good
have some
point.
good news to replace the bad news so that the
Yes.
narrative once again is that we have it together as a family.
Yes,
Yeah.
absolutely. So there is a question that I'm asking every one of my guests at the end of these episodes. And we are going to, or you are going to tell me how you would rank this family on our dinner table scale, which is how likely you would be to want to sit down at this table. And it's on a scale of 1 to 5. So 1 is like absolutely not. They're very toxic,
Mhm.
harmful, unsafe. 3, mixed bag, like healthy and unhealthy, but you wouldn't mind. And 5 is like I would pull up a chair, healthy,
Yeah.
respectful, connected.
And is this the family or each person?
The family as a whole. So like, would you want to sit down at Shabbat?
Oh, this is so good. I think I'm like, am I being a therapist and it's so interesting to watch that unfold.
You're just a regular
I
person sitting to eat dinner with them.
I would say, well, dinner's temporary. It's a
Yes.
2-hour commitment, and I would say I'll give it a 4. I think it'd
Yeah,
be a fun time. I
I
think it'd
agree with
be
you.
really interesting to witness it. And if it doesn't go well, the meal ends.
Yeah, I feel that way too. Like 4, I think is like pretty decent, like enjoyable overall, and
Yeah.
like nothing so egregious that I'm gonna like walk out of there feeling like I got hurt.
And here's the thing with this family and this family dynamic, being a visitor, you have it easy probably because
Yes,
they
probably
want
fun.
to, yeah, it's probably fun. They're going to ask questions and take good care of you. I think it's the closer you get into the family unit, that's when it becomes more uncomfortable. But as a temporary visitor, I think, heck, maybe a 5. Get me
I
a
know.
chair. Maybe I'm down. So
There's probably good food. Bina's house looks nice.
it's a 5 for me. I'm in. I want I want a seat at that table.
We'll see if they'll extend an invitation.
Okay,
Anyone listening?
goodness. I really hope.
Yes. Well, Meg, thank you so much for joining me today. This was such a wonderful conversation. I will make sure to link your book and all of that in the show notes. And thank you again for being here.
Thank you for having me. It's so
Yeah,
fun and such a fun concept and oh my gosh, it's there's I think shows are so brilliant and do it so brilliantly. Like how they go about I mean, they're obviously pulling inspiration from their lives, I'm sure, but just how to exhibit these dynamics,
I
it's such
know,
a imagine it's so challenging to do that. I think they do such a good job. So I
for
love your
sure.
series. I will share the episode
Thank
far and wide.
you.
And
I
thank you so much for
appreciate it.
having me. I really
Thank you. I
appreciate it.
think people will learn a lot from your commentary. So thank you again.
Likewise. Thanks. I'll talk to you soon.
The Calling Home podcast is not engaged in providing therapy services, mental health advice, or other medical advice or services. It is not a substitute for advice from a qualified healthcare provider and does not create any therapist, patient, or other treatment relationship between you and Calling Home or Whitney Goodman. For more information on this, please see Calling Home's terms of service linked in the show notes below.